As we all know, Columbus wasn't the first to step foot in America. Leif Erikson, the Viking traveler, arrived in Canada from Greenland in 1000 AD. Siberian and Mongolian travelers arrived in Alaska around 15 to 10,000 years ago. And DNA tests have shown that certain groups in South and Central America have Polynesian roots. But these are just the confirmed travels from mainstream historians. What they don't tell you is that there are a number of other stories and legends of explorers from diverse places crossing the oceans and arriving in America. Just like the Leif Erikson story, they begin as myth. It was just a telling of an oral history from the Viking sagas. There are several parts that mention monsters and mythological creatures. But in 1960, archaeologists found a Viking settlement in Newfoundland called L'Anse aux Meadows, and definitively proved that Vikings arrived 500 years before Columbus. But today's story even predates that. This video is about a monk who set off west from Europe into the unknown in the year 530 AD. This one comes to us from a very old text. I'll link it below, but this would have been a popular story in Europe after its publication in the 9th century AD. And then it would have become widespread after the invention of the printing press in 1436, inspiring men like Columbus and later travelers of a land to the west in the Atlantic. But the story itself takes place sometime around 514 to 530 AD, and it tells of a Catholic monk living in Ireland in a monastery who hears a story from a visiting monk who set out west in a boat and arrived at a fantastic land where he claims to have seen saints and spoken with divine figures. He said that this was the promised land that God will give the saints after the judgment. He describes it as a perfect land where fruits, nuts, and vegetables grow in plenty, and where man has no need to worry about food. He said the land was located west, across the Atlantic, and when you come to it you must traverse the land until you come to a river flowing east to west. And when you cross that river, you have entered the promised land of the saints, the island of the blessed. This was Saint Bearing of Niall, and he told his story to a group of Irish monks. We embarked and sailed, but a fog so thick covered us that we could barely see the poop or prow of the boat. But when we had spent about an hour like this, a great light shone all around us, and there appeared to us a land wide and full of grass and fruit. When the boat landed, we disembarked and began to go and walk round the island. This we did for 15 days, yet we could not find the end of it. We saw no plants that had not flowers, nor trees that had not fruits. The stones of the land are precious stones. Then on the 15th day we found a river flowing from east to west. As we pondered upon all these things, we were in doubt what we should do. We decided to cross the river, but we awaited advice from God. In the course of a discussion on these things, a man suddenly appeared in a great light before us, who immediately called us by our own names and saluted us, saying, "Well done, good brothers, for the Lord has revealed to you the land, which he will give to his saints. The river there marks the middle of the island. You may not go beyond this point. So return to the place from which you departed." When he said this, I immediately questioned him, where he came from and what was his name. He said, "Why do you ask me where I come from, or how I am called? Why do you not ask me about the island? As you see it now, so it has been from the beginning of the world. Do you feel the need of any food or drink or clothing? Yet for the equivalent of 1 year you have been on this island and have not tasted food or drink. You have never been overcome by sleep, nor has night enveloped you. For here it is always day, without blinding darkness. Our Lord Jesus Christ is the light of the island." Straightway we started on our journey, the man coming with us to the shore where our boat was. As we disembarked in it, he was taken from our eyes, and we passed through the darkness back to the delightful island. When brothers saw us, they rejoiced with great joy at our arrival, and complained of our absence for such a long time. When I heard this, I began to console them, saying, "Think, brothers, only of good. You are living undoubtedly at the gate of paradise. Near here is an island which is called the promised land of the saints, where night does not fall, nor day end. An angel of the Lord guards it. Do you not perceive from the fragrance of our clothing that we have been in God's paradise? Abbot, we knew that you were in God's paradise in the wide sea, but where that paradise is we do not know. We have indeed often noticed the fragrance exuding from our abbot's clothes when he returns from there after a space of 40 days. I stayed on with my son for 2 successive weeks without food or drink, yet our bodies were so satisfied that to others we seemed full of new wine. When the visiting monk told this story, a monk by the name of Saint Brendan was in awe, and began gathering a group of monks to accompany him and help him construct a boat. The text says there were 14 of them when they set out west from Ireland. They began with favorable winds, and only needed to navigate using their single-sail vessel. Eventually, after 15 days heading west, the winds stopped and they began to row. When they could not row any longer, they simply let the tides take them in the direction it would. They trusted that God would bring them to this promised land, and wherever they landed, it was the will of God for them to lay eyes on. After 40 days, they reached an island to the north of them that was very rugged and rocky. They spent 3 days there searching for a landing place, and eventually landed their ship. Upon arriving, a dog greeted them, and they followed it to a town. They described this town as having a great hall, with lots of furniture and plenty of water. And the house in which they stayed had many metal vessels hanging on the walls, along with bridles and horns encased in silver. They were given food and shelter here, but in the night Satan appeared to Saint Brendan in a dream, and he knew they had to continue their journey. They then set off for an unnamed amount of time until they reached another island, the island of sheep. They called it this because there were so many sheep at times one could not see even the grass beneath. These sheep, they said, were all white in color with no spots whatsoever, and they were as big as cattle. They met a man here as well that Saint Brendan described as a man of God. He gave them shelter and food, and let them take as many of the large white sheep as they needed. And he baked them bread, quote, under the ashes. When asked by Saint Brendan why the sheep here were so big, the man only said, "No one takes milk from the sheep on this island, nor winter put any strain on them. They stay in the pastures always, day and night. As a consequence, they are larger here than where you come from." Upon their departure, the man of God told Saint Brendan that he would accompany them, and have a man bring them the rest of their food in 8 days, on Pentecost, because they could not fit everything in their boat. Saint Brendan replied, asking the man, "How do you know where we'll be in 8 days?" The man replied, "Tonight and on Easter Sunday until midday you will be in the island that you see nearby. Afterwards you will sail to another island, which is not far from this one, towards the west, which is called Paradise of Birds. There you will remain until the octave of Pentecost." So the man of God accompanied Saint Brendan and the monks, and they set off again to the nearby islands. When they approached the other islands, the boat began to ground before they could reach its landing place. Saint Brendan ordered the others to disembark from the boat into the sea, which they did. They held the boat on both sides with ropes until they came to a landing place. The island was stony and without grass. There were a few pieces of driftwood on it, but no sand on its shore. While the brothers spent the night outside in prayers and vigils, the man of God remained sitting inside the boat, for he knew the kind of island it was, but he did not want to tell them, lest they be terrified. When morning came, he ordered each of the priests to sing his mass, which they did. While Saint Brendan was himself singing the mass in the boat, the brothers began to carry the raw meat out of the boat to preserve it with salt. When they had done this, they put the pot over the fire. When, however, they were plying the fire with the wood and the pot began to boil, the island began to be in motion like a wave. The brothers rushed to the boat, crying out for protection to the Holy Father. He drew each of them into the boat by his hand, having left everything they had on the island behind. They began to sail. Then the island moved out to sea. The lighted fire could be seen over 2 miles away. Saint Brendan told the brothers what it really was saying. "Brothers, are you surprised at what this island has done? God revealed to me during the night in a vision the secret of this affair. Where we were was not an island, but a fish, the foremost of all that swim in the ocean. He is always trying to bring his tail to meet his head, but he cannot because of his length. His name is Jasconius." When they were sailing near the island where they had spent the 3 days, and came to the western edge of it, they saw another island almost joining it, separated only by a small channel. There was plenty of grass on it, it had groves of trees, and was full of flowers. They started circling it, looking for a landing place, and as they were sailing on its southern side, they found a stream flowing into the sea, and there they put the boat into land. Saint Brendan spoke. "Our holy Lord Jesus has given us a place in which to stay during his holy resurrection. It would, I believe, alone be enough for food and drink. Over the spring there was a tree of extraordinary girth, and no less height, covered with white birds. They covered it so much that one could scarcely see its leaves or branches. And when the man of God saw this, he began to think and ponder within himself what it meant, or what was the reason that such a great multitude of birds could be all collected together. He was so tormented about this that the tears poured out and flowed down upon his cheeks. And he implored God, saying, God, who knows the unknown and reveals all that is secret, you know the distress of my heart. I implore your majesty to have pity and reveal to me, a sinner, through your great mercy your secret, that I now look upon with my eyes. I rely not on what I deserve or my worth, but rather on your boundless pity. When he said this within himself and had taken his seat again, one of the birds flew from the tree, making a noise with their wings, like a handbell, and took up a position on the side of the boat where the man of God was sitting. She sat on the edge of the prow and stretched her wings, as it were as a sign of joy, and looked at the Holy Father. The man of God immediately concluded that God had listened to his plea, and he spoke to the bird. If you are God's messenger, tell me where these birds came from, or for what reason they are congregated here. The bird replied immediately, We survived from the great destruction of the ancient enemy, but we were not associated with them through any sin of ours. When we were created, Lucifer's fall and that of his followers brought about our destruction also. But our God is just and true. In his great judgment he sent us here. We endure no sufferings. Here we can see God's presence. But God has separated us from sharing the lot of others who were faithful. We wander through various regions of the air and the firmament and the earth, just like the other spirits that travel on their missions. But on holy days and Sundays we are given bodies such as you now see, so that we may stay here and praise our Creator. You and your brothers have now spent 1 year on your journey. 6 still remain. Where you celebrate Easter today, there you will celebrate Easter every year. Afterwards you will find what you cherish in your heart, that is, the promised land of the saints. When she said this, she lifted herself up off the prow and flew to the other birds. When the hour of vespers had come, all the birds in the tree chanted, as if it were one voice, beating their wings on their sides. A hymn is due to thee, O God, in Zion, and a vow shall be paid to you in Jerusalem. They kept repeating this versicle for about the space of an hour. To the man of God and his companions, the chant and the sound of their wings seemed in its sweetness like a rhythmical song. The Saint Brendan said to his brothers, Repair your bodies, for today our souls are filled with divine food. After 8 days, Saint Brendan had the boat loaded with all the things the steward had brought, and had the vessels filled from the spring. When all was assembled at the shore, the same bird with the speedy flight came and sat on the prow of the boat. The man of God understood that she wanted to tell him something. Then in a human voice she said, Next year you will celebrate with us the holy day of Easter, and the time you have just spent with us. And where you were this year on Maundy Thursday, there you will be next year on that day. Similarly, you will celebrate the vigil of Easter Sunday, where you formerly celebrated it, on the back of Jascaneus. After 8 months you will also find an island which is called the Island of the Community of Elbe, and there you will celebrate Christmas Day. When she had said this, she returned to her own place. The brothers stretched the sail and steered out into the ocean. Then the Holy Father with his group was driven here and there for 3 months over the space of the ocean. They could see nothing but sky and sea. But one day there appeared to them an island. Upon landing there appeared to them 2 wells, one muddy and the other clear. The brothers then rushed with their vessels to drink the water. The man of God watching them said, My sons, do not do a forbidden thing that is something without permissions of the elders who live on this island. They will freely give to you the waters that you now want to drink. Upon meeting these elders, the Holy Father kept questioning in various ways, but he could not get one answer out of them. He only indicated with his hands, with incredible meekness, that they should be silent. As soon as the Holy Father realized this was the rule of the place, he spoke to his brothers, saying, Keep your mouths from speaking, lest these holy brothers be defiled by your voice. St. Brendan examined how the church was built. It was square, of the same length as breadth, and had 7 lights, 3 before the altar, which was in the middle, and 2 each before the other 2 altars. The altars were made of crystal, cut in a square, and likewise all the vessels were crystal. St. Brendan questioned the Holy Father on their silence and their community life. How could human flesh endure such a life? The Father replied with great reverence and humility, "Abbot, I confess before my Christ, it is 80 years since we came to this island. We have heard no human voice except when singing praise to God. Among the 24 of us no voice is raised, except by a signal given by a finger or the eyes, and that only by the elders. None of us has suffered ill in the flesh, or from the spirits that infest the human race, since we came here." St. Brendan said, "May we stay here now or not?" He replied, "You may not, because it is not the will of God. Has not God revealed to you before you came here to us what you must do?" When the feast days were over, the blessed Brendan and his followers brought provisions into the boat and received the blessings of the holy men. Then sailed out to the ocean as fast as he could, whether by rowing or sailing. The boat was carried off to many different places until the beginning of Lent. One day they saw an island not far from them. When the brothers saw it, they began to row eagerly, because they were very distressed from hunger and thirst. Their food and drink had failed 3 days before. When the Holy Father had blessed the landing place and they all disembarked from the boat, they found a clear well, a variety of plants and roots in a circle around the well, and various kinds of fish swimming along the riverbed into the sea. St. Brendan said to his brothers, "God has given us here a comfort after our toil. Gather the plants and roots which the Lord has prepared for his servants." After embarking 3 days and 3 nights passed, and the winds dropped, and the sea coagulated. As it were, it was so smooth. The Holy Father said, "Ship the oars and loosen the sail. Wherever God wants to direct the boat, let him direct it." The boat therefore was carried around for 20 days. Afterwards God raised a wind favorable to them again, from west to east. They then set sail out to the sea and sped on. They ate always on the 3rd day. The Venerable Father and his companions sailed out into the ocean, and their boat was carried along for 40 days. One day there appeared to them a beast of immense size, following them at a distance. He spouted foam from his nostrils and plowed through the waves at a great speed, as if it were to devour them. When the brothers saw this, they called upon the Lord, saying, "Deliver us, Lord, so that the beast does not devour us." St. Brendan comforted them, saying, "Do not be afraid. You have little faith. God, who always defends us, will deliver us from the mouth of this beast and from the other dangers." As the beast came near to them, he caused waves of extraordinary height to go before him right up to the boat, so that the brothers were more and more afraid. After their pleas asking for deliverance, a mighty monster passed near them from the west, going to encounter the beast. He immediately attacked him, emitting fire from his mouth. The elder spoke to his brothers, "Look, my sons, at the great deeds of our Savior. See how the beasts obey their Creator. Wait presently for the outcome of this affair. This battle will do us no damage." Another day we saw at a distance a very large island full of trees. While they were drawing near to its shores and disembarked from the boat, they saw the end portion of the beast that had been slain. St. Brendan said, "See what wished to devour you, you now shall devour. You will stay a long while on this island. Take your provisions from the beast, enough for 3 months, for tonight its flesh will be devoured by beasts." One day they saw an island a long distance away from them. St. Brendan said, "Do you see that island? 3 choirs of people are on that island. One of the boys, another of youths, and a third of elders. And one of your brothers will remain on pilgrimage there." After staying some time and worshipping with these 3 choirs on the island, they embarked. The text reads, "The Venerable Father and his companions set sail. When it was 3 o'clock, he ordered his brothers to refresh their bodies with the fruits of the island, of the strong men. As he said this, the man of God took one of them. He saw its size, and that it was full of juice. He expressed wonder and said, 'I have never seen or gathered fruit of such size.' They were all of equal size, and like a large ball. The man of God then asked that a vessel be brought to him. He squeezed one of the fruits and got a pound of juice from it, which he divided into 12 ounces. The Holy Father gave an ounce of juice to each of the brothers. One fruit, therefore, fed one brother for 12 days, so that he always had in his mouth a taste of honey. After some days, the Holy Father prescribed a fast for 3 days. Then when the 3 days were over, a great bird was seen flying near the boat, carrying a branch of an unknown tree. At the tip of the branch was a cluster of grapes, of extraordinary redness. The bird dropped this cluster from its beak into the saint's lap. Then St. Brendan called the attention of his brothers and said, "Look at the meal that God has sent you." The grapes of this cluster were as big as apples. Now on a third day they saw an island not far from them, covered completely with densely planted trees, bearing the same crop of grapes of such incredible fertility that all the trees were bent down to the ground, with the same fruit of the same color. No tree was barren, nor was there a tree of any other kind in that island. The man of God disembarked and began to walk around the island. It had a perfume like that of a house filled with pomegranates. Meanwhile, the brothers were waiting at the boat until the man of God should return. All the while the breeze bore in on them a sweet perfume. The venerable father found 6 copious wells full of flourishing plants and roots of many kinds, and he returned to his brothers carrying with him some of the first fruits of the island, and said to them, "Disembark, pitch your tent and refresh yourselves with the good fruits of this land that the Lord has shown us." And for 40 days they fed on grapes and on the plants and roots of the wells. But at the end of that time they embarked, bringing with them as much as they could carry. It happened on one occasion that as St. Brendan was celebrating the feast of St. Peter, they found the sea so clear that they could see whatever was underneath them. When they looked into the deep, they saw the different kinds of fish lying on the sand below. It even seemed to them that they could touch them with their hands, so clear was that sea. They were like herds lying in pastures. They were so numerous that they looked like a city of circles as they lay, their heads touching their tails. His brother asked the venerable father to celebrate his mass in silence, lest the fish would hear and come up to pursue them. The Holy Father smiled and said to them, "I am surprised at your foolishness. Why are you afraid of those fish when you were not afraid of the devourer, the master of all the fish of the sea, sitting and singing psalms, as you often did, on his back? Indeed, you cut wood and lit fire and cooked meat there. Why then are you afraid of those?" When he said these things, he began to intone as loudly as he could. Others of the brothers kept their eyes on the fish all the time. When the fish heard him singing, they came up from the bottom and began to swim in a circle round the boat. In such a way the brothers could not see beyond the fish anywhere. So great was the multitude of the different fishes swimming, still they did not come near the boat, but kept swimming at a distance in a wide arc. And so they kept swimming, here and there, until the man of God finished Mass. After this, as if they were taking flight, they all swam by different paths of the ocean, away from the sight of the servant of God. It took 8 days for St. Brendan, even with a favoring wind, and all his canvas stretched out to the full, to cross the clear sea. One day when they had celebrated their masses, a pillar in the sea appeared to them, that seemed to be not so far distant. Still it took them 3 days to come upon it. When the man of God approached it to see the top of it, he could not. It was so high. It was higher than the sky. Moreover, a wide mesh net was wrapped around it. The mesh was so wide that the boat could pass through its openings. They could not decide of what substance the net was made. It had the color of silver, but they thought that it seemed harder than marble. The pillar was of bright crystal. Brendan spoke to his brothers. "Ship the oars and take down the mast and sail. Let some of you at the same time take hold of the meshes of the net." There was a large space, roughly about a mile, at all points between the net and the pillar. And likewise, the net went down a similar distance into the sea. When they had done what they had been ordered, the man of God said to them, "Let the boat in through one of the meshes, so that we can have a close look at the wonders of our Creator." The sea was as clear to them as glass, so that they could see everything that was underneath. They could examine the foundations of the pillar, and also the edge of the net lying on the seabed. The light of the sun was as bright below as above the water. Then St. Brendan measured the 4 sides of the opening of the net. It was about 6 to 7 feet on every side. Then they sailed throughout the whole day. Near one side of the pillar and its shadows, they could still feel the heat of the sun. They stayed there until 3 o'clock. The man of God kept measuring the one side. The measurement of each of the 4 sides of that pillar was the same, namely about 700 yards. The venerable father was engaged for 4 days in this way around the 4 angles of the pillar. On the 4th day, however, they found a chalice of the same substance as the net, and a paten of the same color as the pillar, lying in a window in the side of the pillar, facing the south. After 8 days they caught sight of an island not far away, very rough, rocky, and full of slag, without trees or grass, full of smiths' forges. The venerable father said to his brothers, I am troubled about this island. I do not want to go on it, or even come near it. But the wind is bringing us directly there. As they were sailing for a moment beside it, a stone's throw away, they heard the sound of bellows blowing, as if it were thunder, and the blows of hammers on iron and anvils. When he heard this, the venerable father armed himself, making the sign of the Lord in all four directions, saying, Lord Jesus Christ, deliver us from this island. When the man of God had finished speaking, one of the inhabitants of the island was seen to come out of the doors, apparently to do something or other. He was very shaggy and full at once of fire and darkness. When he saw the servants of Christ pass near the island, he went back into the forge. The man of God blessed himself again and said to his brothers, My sons, raise the sail higher, still, and row fast as you can, and let us flee from this island. Even before he had finished speaking, the same savage came to the shore near where they were, carrying a tongs in his hand that held a lump of burning slag of immense size and heat. He immediately threw the lump on top of the servants of Christ, but it did not hurt them. It passed more than 200 yards above them. Then the sea where it fell began to boil, as if a volcano were erupting there. The smoke rose from the sea as from a fiery furnace. But when the man of God had got about a mile away from the spot where the lump fell, all the islanders came to the shore, each of them carrying a lump of his own. Some of them began to throw the lumps after the servant of Christ into the sea, the one throwing his lump over the other, all while going back to the forges and setting the lumps on fire. It looked as if the whole island was ablaze, like one big furnace, and the sea boiled. All day long they could hear great howling from the island. Even when they could no longer see it, the howling of its denizens still reached their ears, and the stench of the fire assailed their nostrils. In another day there appeared to them, as it were through the clouds, a high mountain in the ocean, not far away towards the north. It was very smoky on top. Immediately the wind drew them very fast to the shore of that island, until the boat stopped a little distance from the island. The cliff was so high they could scarcely see the top of it. It was also the color of coal, and unusually perpendicular, just like a wall. When they looked back at this island from a distance, they saw that the mountain was no longer covered with smoke, but was spouting flames from itself, and then breathing back, as it were, the same flames again upon itself. The whole mountain from the summit right down to the sea looked like one big pyre. After sailing to the south away from the fiery island for 7 days, the saints came across another island, where they claimed to speak to the betrayer of Jesus, known as Judas. Then, after 3 more days sailing south, they came upon a small island about 200 yards in circumference, with 2 caves, and inhabiting it was a single hermit covered in white hair. The story reads, when St. Brendan had come near to the door of one of the caves, an elder came out to meet him from the other, saying, How good and joyful it is that you brothers live together. St. Brendan questioned him, For how long have you endured such a life here? He answered, saying, I was brought up in the monastery of St. Patrick for 50 years, where I looked after the cemetery of the brothers. One day when my director had pointed out to me the place to bury one who had died, an unknown elder appeared to me and said, Do not make a grave there, brother, for it is the burial place of another. I said to him, Father, who are you? He said, Why do you not recognize me? Am I not your abbot? I said to him, St. Patrick, my abbot? He replied, I am he. I died yesterday. That is the place of my burial. Make the grave of our brother here and tell no one what I have told you. But go tomorrow to the seashore. There you will find a boat. Embark in it, and it will bring you to a spot where you will await the day of your death. In the morning I went in accordance with the Holy Father's command to the shore and found exactly what he had told me. When I had embarked, I sailed for 3 days and 3 nights. After that I let the boat go wherever the wind would drive it. Then on the 7th day this rock appeared to me. So I got on it immediately, letting the boat go and kicking it with my foot so that it would not come back. Always every 3rd day the same servant brought me the same food, that is 1 fish, to do for 3 days. I ate 1/3 of the fish each day, and by God's grace I had no thirst. But on Sundays a trickle of water came forth from the rock, and from this I could drink and fill my little container. And then after 30 years I found these 2 caves and this well. On it I live, for 60 years since. I have lived on this well without nourishment of any other food. I have been 90 years on this island, living on the fish for 30 years, and on the food afforded by the well for 60. I lived for 50 years in my native land. The sum of the years of my life until now is 140. Here I have but to await in the flesh, as I have been assured, the day of my judgment. Go then to your native land and bring with you the vessels filled with water from this well. You must do this, since you have a journey before you of 40 days, which you will take till Holy Saturday. You will celebrate Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday, and the holy days of Easter where you have celebrated them for the last 6 years, the island of birds. You will then, having received the blessing of your stewards, set out for the promised land of the saints. There you will stay for 40 days, and then the God of your fathers will bring you safe and sound to the land of your births. St. Brendan therefore and his brothers, having received the blessing of the man of God, began to sail towards the south for the whole of Lent. Their boat was carried hither and thither, and their only food was the water which they had gotten on the island of the man of God. Then, as the man of God foretold, they came to the island of the steward on Holy Saturday. As they arrived at the landing place, he came to meet them with great joy, and helped each of them out of the boat on his arm. When they had finished the divine office for the holy day, he spread supper before them. When evening came, they embarked in their boat, and the steward came with them. When they set sail, they found Jaskinius immediately, in his usual place. There they sang praise to God all night, and the masses in the morning. When the mass was over, however, Jaskinius began to go his own way. St. Brendan comforted his brothers. Do not be afraid. You will suffer no evil. Help for the journey is upon us. Jaskinius went in a straight course to the shore of the island of the birds. There they stayed until the octave of Pentecost. When the season of the feast was over, the steward was with them, and said to St. Brendan, Embark in your boat and fill your water vessels from this well. This time I shall be the companion and guide of your journey. Without me you will not be able to find the promised land of the saints. As they embarked in the boat, all of the birds that were on the island began to say, as it were, with one voice, May God, the salvation of all of us, prosper your journey. St. Brendan and those who were with him sailed to the island of the steward, who was with them, and there they took on board provisions for 40 days. Their voyage was 40 days towards the east. The stewards went to the front of the boat and showed them the way. When the 40 days were up, as the evening drew on, a great fog enveloped them, so that one of them could hardly see another. The steward, however, said to St. Brendan, Do you know what fog this is? St. Brendan replied, What? Then the other said, That fog encircles the island for which you have been searching for 7 years. After the space of an hour, a mighty light shone all around them again, and the boat rested on the shore. On disembarking from the boat, they saw a wide land full of trees, bearing fruit as in autumn time. When they had gone in a circle around that land, night had still not come to them. They took what fruit they wanted, and drank from the wells, and for the space of 40 days they traveled the whole land, and could not find the end of it. But one day they came upon a great river, flowing through the middle of the island. Then St. Brendan said to his brothers, We cannot cross this river, and we do not know the size of this land. They had been considering these thoughts within themselves, when a youth met them, and embraced them with great joy, calling each by his name, saying, Happy are they that live in your house. They shall praise you from generation to generation. When he said this, he spoke to St. Brendan. There before you lies the land which you have sought for a long time. You could not find it immediately, because God wanted to show you his varied secrets in the great ocean. Return then to the land of your birth, bringing with you some of the fruits of this land, and as many of the precious stones as your boat can carry. After the passage of many times, this land will become known to your successors. When persecution of the Christians shall come, the river that you see divides the island. Just as this land appears to you, so shall it remain, always without any shadow of night, for its light is Christ. St. Brendan with his brothers, having taken samples of the fruits of the land, and of all of its varieties of precious stones, took this leave of the blessed steward and the youth. He then embarked in his boat, and began to sail through the middle of the fog. When they had passed through it, they came to the island called the Island of Delights. They availed themselves of 3 days' hospitality there, and then, receiving a blessing, St. Brendan returned home directly. So, did St. Brendan find America? Well, it seems plausible he found Iceland or maybe the Faroe Islands when he was talking about the land of the sheep, or the adjacent rocky landscape. He said they baked their bread under the ashes. I thought that was interesting because they still do that in Iceland today, although there weren't supposed to be any settlers on Iceland during this time. However, experts do say it is possible they were inhabited. Another idea people have brought up is that the island of fire and rock was the volcanoes we find on and around Iceland. And maybe the island that was moving, they said was a sea monster, could have been made of ice, or just subject to earthquakes from the nearby erupting volcanoes. Just a thought. There's definitely a lot of metaphors and religious allegorical meaning to this book, so you kind of have to sift through that to find out where they might have actually gone. But it is possible for them to get pretty far on the 7-year journey, even though they were going in circles a bit. Historians say it only took the Vikings 15 days to sail to Iceland from Norway, and St. Brendan's ship would have been pretty similar to Viking vessels. The detail that struck me the most was the section about the clear waters. So clear they could see a school of fish at the bottom. This only happened south of a certain point. They had to have reached somewhere tropical for this to happen. Maybe the Canary Islands, or even Bermuda or the Caribbean like Columbus. Another detail that I found interesting was the mention of a mysteriously large and unnamed juicy fruit. And the island they found giant grapes in plenty. When Leif Erikson arrived in America, he wrote the land was plentiful with timber and grapes, so he named it Vinland, land of vines. Very odd. Also, grapes don't grow in Newfoundland, but we'll talk about that later. Anyway, there was also mention of a river that ran east to west through the land of the blessed. This could have been any of the rivers on the east coast of America. Now I would say the most obvious would be the St. Lawrence Seaway, possibly. If they had taken a similar route as Leif Erikson, or came from Iceland, they could have hit land in the American Northeast and hit the St. Lawrence Seaway in their 40 days of travel, thinking they were still on an island. Or it could have been any of the rivers in the east, it's really hard to say. Definitely be interesting to try to find an island that has a river running through it in the Atlantic, and you might be able to line up some of the geographical details that St. Brendan gave. But 7 years of travel, they definitely would have been able to make it to some pretty remote spots. We really have no idea, but this book gives us some good details and clues. Definitely worth doing some more research and looking into, and I really wonder if there's ever been any artifacts attributed to their travels. I wonder if any other monks made the journey and just didn't document it. The story makes it seem like there's a lot of monks and hermits that were just traveling west out to sea. Either way, just the existence of the story would have inspired travelers all over Europe. And I wonder if there were any others before Columbus that did just that. Thank you so much for watching. If you do want to get this book to read for yourself, it's on Amazon for like $12, so put that link below. Also, if you're not subscribed to our Patreon, go check that out. It's only $3, very cheap. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.